Hi, this is Yolanda Van Veen, and in this segment we're going to talk about the budding and blooming of orchids. Now, orchids are such a beautiful plant to have in your house and in your garden if you live in a warm tropical climate. And there's just a few things that they need to survive really well. And first off, orchids need a lot of humidity. So I found even in the house, they do best in a bathroom or in the kitchen, somewhere where there's lots of humidity. They don't like to be in a really dry area. So if you have a brand new house, sometimes it's hard to get them to bloom again because they just get too dry. So try putting them in your kitchen or in your bathroom, somewhere where they're going to get a little bit more moisture. And in my house, I found that the east facing window is the best. They love that morning sun coming up on them, and then they don't want the afternoon sun even in the house because they don't want a lot of heat on them. And if you notice in nature, they're found in the jungles and in the wilds of South America, and they're growing in the woods. They're growing in the shade where there's a lush canopy. They might get some filtered sun coming through those trees, but they're still basically in shady, moist conditions. You want to recreate those conditions in your house. So you never want to give them direct sun because it will probably burn them. And an artificial light is great too. They love artificial lights. And even if it's a light that's on at night, they love my kitchen where I have them underneath a light that's on at night. It's the only light in the whole house that's on at nighttime. And they love it because they get the sun during the day, then they get that light at night, and they seem to do really well with it. Now, to get an orchid to bloom again, there's a few tricks. And orchids kind of have their own time frame, so no matter what you do, sometimes you can't really push them into blooming until it's their time. They bloom, then they go dormant, just like any other bulb would, and then they come up and bloom again when it's their time. So if it's not their time to bloom, sometimes no matter what you do, they're not going to bloom. So I found putting them in that east window is always the best thing you can do, for us on the west coast anyway, because we have the hot afternoon sun that's coming from the west. So we want to make sure that they are getting enough light, because if they're not getting enough light, you're not getting any blooms as well. So to get an orchid to bloom, they have to have phosphate. So if you can buy a type of blooming fertilizer, don't give them high nitrogen, because nitrogen makes the foliage, not the bloom. So if you pump them with nitrogen, you're never going to get them to bloom. So if you get an orchid blooming fertilizer or any kind of blooming fertilizer that's high in phosphates, you'll find that you'll get blooms much easier. So I always just give them some phosphates at the end of our summer. So I try to keep it the same as the outside season. So I give them some phosphate blooming fertilizer in the fall or late summer, just like they would do in nature. And then many times they'll come up and give me blooms by Christmas time in the house. And it's such a joy. And all orchids are different. You can never force them into doing anything. But never give them nitrogen when you want them to bloom. Give them only the phosphates. And those are the last or the second number that's on the fertilizer information. So never give them lots of nitrogen no matter what you do, because they won't bloom for you. So a lot of times just drying them out and giving them water, drying them out and giving them water will get them to bloom as well. And another trick I found is in the winter time too, if you give them the phosphates and you keep them in the basement or somewhere dark but not too cold for a month or two, and then you set them back out into the light, just like a Christmas zygos cactus, a lot of times it'll trick them into blooming again. But orchids are a beautiful plant, and they're worth growing even in the indoors in a cold climate because they're such a beautiful bloom.